This is a story of a father and son, united by a shared vision, on a journey around the Middle East known locally as the Levant, a region of ancient lands, political unrest and timeless beauty.
Ever since I first visited the region in the 90s, I knew I'd come back, and I was determined to bring Denis along for this adventure.
After 30 years back in the souk, what are your impressions?
Hasn't changed much.
When the situation in the region deteriorated catastrophically, no one told us this was a good idea. I also felt we shouldn't go.
Political unrest was rampant. Just as they were about to set off, violence erupted. Hamas' deadly attacks, Israel's retaliation. Everything seemed uncertain.
After the embassy bombing in Damascus, we were sure we wouldn't be able to go. But astonishingly, on the day we were due to fly, the skies reopened for commercial flights, and off we went from Dublin to Beirut on the 16th of April 2024.
We're at Dublin Airport. We've checked in for our flights.
As they explored the vibrant streets of Beirut, they saw contrasts.
Beirut is a very modern place with very many interesting designed buildings. The city was known for decades as the Paris of the East prior to the Civil War, which claimed the lives of 150,000 people.
But like the Phoenix, Beirut and Lebanon have found new ways to renew and recover. Despite the country's hardships, with 18 different religions and 5 million people, Lebanon is in some respects a miracle of coexistence.
They took a tour to the Jaita Grotto.
This is the deepest point, 6 to 7 meters deep in the cave.
And then to Byblos, which is one of the oldest continuously inhabited towns in the world.
After a long day walking, Dad needed to get a corn on his foot removed. In a most unexpected place, a Hezbollah stronghold in South Beirut. All the while, the chiropodist was playing Irish rebel songs.
I went out for a morning walk and I got lost on my way back. I asked a man, he introduced me to a man with a motorbicycle whose name is Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali was an ex-army man. He's now working for an insurance company. So he gave me a ride on the back of the scooter halfway around the town back to the hotel.
Meanwhile, I went off on a day trip with a guide called Hassan and a fellow traveller called Hussein. First we visited Anjar, the first Muslim city built by the Umayyad dynasty in 704 AD. We then went on to Baalbek, one of the centres where Hezbollah was founded by Iranian militants in 1982. Baalbek is also home to some of the finest Roman ruins in the world, built with the wealth and ingenuity of the Phoenicians. Our guide Hassan then brought us to an important mosque in Baalbek, where he showed me how they pray, and we both prayed for peace.
Crossing borders wasn't always easy, especially into Syria, a country still under the shadow of its dictator, Bashar al-Assad. But for Dermot and Denis, it wasn't just about sightseeing. It was about understanding and finding connections.
We kept emailing tour operators right up to the very last minute, uncertain if it would be safe. But there was a sense of duty to witness history and to see for ourselves what was really happening. We met our travel companions Erin and Fran in Beirut before we were taken across the border. There we met our security driver Yosef and our incredible guide Tassir, who'd been guiding tourists for over 40 years.
When you enter Syria, you are assaulted with images of the tyrant Bashar al-Assad. Since he was deposed, we have learned the full extent of the evils he and his cronies perpetrated on the Syrian people. The level of devastation from the civil war and Assad's brutal assault on his people was hard to comprehend. And yet, the people everywhere we went in Syria were so incredibly friendly and welcoming. For many, they hadn't seen a tourist in over 13 years. We drove through checkpoint after checkpoint, manned by friendly army officers. To our surprise, they nearly all waved and smiled, having checked our papers.
It seems to me that every single commercial activity along this road has been abandoned.
The journey took them to places like the magnificent Crac de Chevalier, a Crusader fortress that stood as a silent testament to centuries of conflict. In Palmyra, once a thriving hub for 1 million tourists, they were among the last visitors, marvelling at the ancient ruins as the region's fortunes crumbled.
I believe we are the actual only tourists here. In the past, they've probably had about 1 million tourists, and our guide was just saying that last year, possibly no more than even 5,000 in the whole year. I just walked over here without the guide, and they called me back because they said the area could be mined.
What had once been one of the wonders of the world now lies scattered. But what struck me most was that even in the face of destruction, the spirit of the people, those who still lived there, remained unbroken. That evening, we stayed in a city called Hama. We happened upon a barber's where these fashionably dressed youngish lads were listening to Eminem. They cut my hair as we all communicated through Google Translate, while outside walked past young men dressed in conservative religious clothing. This country was clearly an extraordinary blend of contrasts. After leaving the barbers, we went back to the hotel, where dozens of people were glued to the Real Madrid versus Barcelona game.
In Aleppo, a city ravaged by war, Dermot and Denis witnessed firsthand how life continued amid the rubble.
This is apparently the most famous falafel takeaway in Aleppo. So good that the people in Damascus, people come up here together.
We're now going to the castle here in Aleppo.
We went to the Aleppo citadel built by the famous leader Saladin. With its long, narrow alleyways, the Al Medina Souk is the largest covered historic market in the world, and it's approximately 13 kilometres long.
The resilience was palpable. People danced, played games, and shared stories over a simple game of backgammon.
It was emotional. It seemed like the world had forgotten. But here, the people were still living, still dreaming. We could feel it in the music, hear it in the laughter.
They then visited Malula, where 14 nuns had been abducted during the war. Thankfully, they had been released unharmed.
Malula is the last place where Aramaic, the language of Jesus, is spoken every day.
Finally, they visited Damascus, where they walked through the bustling souks and toured streets unchanged for hundreds of years.
This is the Umayyad Mosque, the biggest mosque in Syria, as I understand it, and the fourth most important mosque in the world, I think, for Shia.
They saw people of several different religions, all living and worshipping side by side.
And nowadays they are using the machines and molds and so to make, while he's doing according to the oldest way of the working.
And then they said goodbye to their new friends and companions. Arriving in Jordan, they were met by their guide, Amir.
Holy Land is where all the biblical stories took place. And that would include what we now refer to as Jordan, Palestine, and North Egypt.
After visiting the ancient city of Jerash, they went onwards to Petra.
Petra exceeded my expectations. The 1.2 kilometre entrance through the gorge is beyond sensational. And then it opens up and you see the treasury, the building everyone recognises.
We walked through these mountains, through the sea, and entered into that open area.
We arrived at the Dead Sea, in serious need of some rest and recuperation.
In Israel, amidst the complex web of politics and history, they found moments of peace. From the surreal experience of a concert orchestra performing the heart of Jerusalem to quiet moments at the Sea of Galilee, they encountered a mixture of hope, pain, and humanity.
Our friends Moshe and Tirza had arranged to meet us the other side of the heavily armed security checkpoint. I was briefly questioned before being allowed through, but Denis was kept in limbo for over 3 hours. I'd worked with Moshe in the 1980s, helping to bring tourists from America to Ireland and he to Israel. And since then, he and Tirza had grown their business to bringing over 300,000 tourists per year to their country. I was always fond of Moshe and it was great to see him again after so long. What struck me about Jerusalem was the contrasts. We met our guide Martin, a man working tirelessly to protect Palestinian farmers.
Have people sleeping or staying overnight also in these communities to stop the settlers coming in at night and harassing the Palestinians.
And then witness the healing power of a music at a concert. Life carries on despite the challenges.
Ibrahim, an academic and guide, brought me on a tour to the West Bank in Palestine, through the ugly walls of the separation barrier that restricts the movement of over 3 million Palestinians. We drove into Bethlehem, where we visited the birthplace of Jesus. I was the only tourist there.
Ibrahim guided Denis and me through the streets of Jerusalem to the Holy Fire ceremony at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This annual event is like the Super Bowl for Christians. We couldn't believe we managed to get into the church just after the fire was lit, and as it spread throughout the church. It was an amazing experience for us to share together.
The next day, we visited a hospital in Ashkelon, where Moishe, Tirza and their friend Ron had restored an important Muslim shrine.
We then visited Dr. Ron's house, which is just 200 metres from the Gaza border.
This is a bullet-proof window, and here you can see the wall, and behind the wall it's the Palestinian villages of Gaza.
He and his wife Judith had to hide underground on the 7th of October when 20 of their friends and neighbours were killed.
That evening, Moshe and Tirza and Dermot and Denis attended the annual Holocaust Remembrance event at Yad Vashem.
We met one of the survivors of Auschwitz, a lady called Giselle. The final leg of our journey was to the Sea of Galilee. All of these names of all of these places from the Bible that we've heard since we were young. Wherever we went on our journey, faith and religion were ever present.
After 22 days, their odyssey came to an end. But the experiences, the emotions, and the lessons of the journey would stay with them forever.
I spent 30 years of the Troubles trying to persuade people it was safe to visit Ireland, when any violence was a couple of hundred miles away from the main tourist destinations. And yet it was hard to change the perception that Ireland was unsafe to visit. I feel similarly about the Levant.
Yes, there are places where it is too dangerous to visit, but it is a huge region, so full of wonder and welcome, and I hope our trip can inspire others to do something similar someday soon. Even amidst conflict, vast areas of these countries remain peaceful, with people pursuing everyday life with resilience and hope. People are just trying to live, to love, and to survive.
Had a shop for 25 years, and then the war came. And he had spent all his savings, moved to Latika with his family, and has moved back. And he's one of the first shops in the area.
Writing this book with Denis wasn't easy, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to share what we learned and how life goes on in the Middle East despite all its turmoil. It was a privilege to experience that and to share it together.
I feel very lucky to have been able to do this with my dad.
Desert Bonds is more than just a travelogue.
It's been lovely meeting the three of you and getting to know everyone.
The people I'm with are amazing.
It's a reminder that no matter the conflict, life persists, hope endures, and the bonds we form are the greatest treasures of all.